The courtroom felt colder than it should have, as if the air itself understood that something unfair was about to happen. The girl sitting at the plaintiff's table, no older than 16, kept her eyes fixed on the pattern of the floor tiles, pretending she didn't hear the whispers coming from the back row. Her father sat stiffly on the opposite side, arms crossed, jaw locked, rehearsing whatever speech he planned to deliver. He had dragged her into this room, insisting he needed to teach her a lesson, and he seemed disturbingly proud of that fact. Judge Judy observed both sides with that sharp, measured look she had mastered over decades. She could read people before they even opened their mouths. The father exuded the same energy she often saw in individuals who claimed they wanted justice while actually seeking revenge. The daughter gave off something entirely different, the quiet desperation of someone cornered by the very person who was supposed to protect her. When the judge called the case, the father rose immediately, as if excited for his chance to perform. He spoke loudly, purposefully, making sure everyone in the courtroom heard him. He described his daughter as disrespectful, out of control, ungrateful, each word harsher than the last. He listed her alleged failures like ammunition, firing them one by one, hoping each shot would damage her more than the previous. He never once glanced at the daughter while speaking. It was clear his goal was not resolution but humiliation. The girl didn't move. She didn't defend herself. Her hands twisted together on her lap, and the fear of making the wrong sound kept her frozen in place. She had already learned that responding only made him angrier. Judge Judy held up a hand to silence the father, and he actually had the nerve to look offended, as if he believed he deserved uninterrupted time to tear down his own child. The judge turned her attention to the girl, softening her tone ever so slightly, something she rarely did in court. She asked her a simple question, not about accusations, not about rules, not about behavior. Just whether she was okay. It took the girl a moment to answer. Her voice cracked, not because she was weak, but because for the first time in this entire situation, someone was speaking to her instead of about her. She admitted she didn't understand why her father had brought her there. She said she had never wanted to be in court. She quietly confessed that she felt like she couldn't meet his expectations no matter how hard she tried. As she spoke, her father let out a frustrated sigh loud enough for the courtroom to hear. He rolled his eyes, muttered something under his breath, and shook his head in a way that suggested her words only validated his claims. He expected the judge to join him in his disgust. He thought Judy would scold the girl, maybe force her to apologize, maybe even lecture her about respecting her father. But Judge Judy did the opposite. She leaned forward, lacing her fingers together, and asked the father why he believed humiliating his daughter in a public courtroom would fix anything. Before he could answer, she clarified that bringing a child to court over personal issues was not discipline, it was cruelty. The father looked stunned, as if no one had ever questioned his parenting before. He tried to interrupt, but Judy continued, her voice firm, dissecting every weak point in his reasoning. She pointed out that a parent's job is to guide, not degrade. She emphasized that shame is not a teaching tool. She reminded him that children are not punching bags for parental frustration. Every word cut deeper than anything the father had said earlier, but instead of harming the girl, it protected her. The daughter's eyes lifted from the floor for the first time, disbelief flickering in them. She wasn't used to someone standing between her and her father. She wasn't used to someone calling out what he did. In that moment, she realized she wasn't invisible, and she wasn't alone. The father tried to regain control of the situation by raising his voice again, complaining about her attitude, her tone, her lack of obedience. Judy stopped him mid-sentence and asked him a question he couldn't answer. What exactly had his daughter done that required legal intervention instead of a conversation at home? He stuttered. He stalled. His excuses grew weaker by the second, and as he floundered, the girl watched something she had never imagined possible, her father losing power. Not because she defied him, but because someone finally refused to let him twist the narrative. Judge Judy wasn't just ruling on a case. She was restoring dignity to a child who had been stripped of it long before stepping into the courtroom. The father's voice diminished until it was nothing but a frustrated whisper, and the daughter's silence transformed from fear into strength. For the first time in a long time, she felt the heavy pressure on her chest lighten just enough for her to take a full breath, and that was only the beginning. The girl remained seated as her father's voice faded into the background, though he still looked like a man hunting for the next opportunity to reassert control. But the balance in the room had shifted. Everyone felt it. Even he felt it, though he pretended otherwise. Judge Judy turned her full attention to the case file in front of her, flipping through the documents the father had submitted. She already suspected that half of it was exaggerated nonsense meant to make him look like the wounded party, but she gave each page the courtesy of a glance, just to confirm her instincts. The father sat straighter, almost smug again, as if he believed the papers he brought would validate him. But Judy had been in this job too long. It took her roughly 10 seconds to find the first inconsistency. She raised an eyebrow, and the father shifted in his seat, clearly growing uncomfortable under her scrutiny. She closed the folder gently, not slamming, not tossing it aside, just shutting it with a level of calm that somehow felt more intimidating than a shout. Then she asked the daughter if she knew what her father had written about her. The girl shook her head quickly. She hadn't been shown anything. She had just been told to get in the car that morning, never given a chance to prepare for whatever this spectacle was supposed to be. Judge Judy motioned for a clerk to bring her a copy, but before handing it over, she asked the father the most important question of the afternoon. Did you ever show her these accusations before filing them? He hesitated, and the hesitation alone revealed the answer. He claimed it wasn't necessary. He claimed he was the parent, therefore he had the right to handle things as he saw fit. He talked about respect, about authority, about how children today think they can talk back to their elders. Judy listened, but her expression didn't change. Her silence cut sharper than any argument. When she finally spoke, her tone carried the icy precision of a scalpel. She told him that filing complaints without even informing his daughter was not responsible parenting, it was ambush. He opened his mouth to argue, but she didn't let him get far. She asked him if he understood what the word communication meant, and whether he had attempted it with his daughter before resorting to dragging her into court. His cheeks flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. He muttered something about how she never listens. Judy immediately countered with a very pointed question. How can she listen when you never talk? You make demands, but that isn't communication. The daughter lowered her head again, not out of shame this time, but from the intensity of the judge's defense. She wasn't used to someone understanding her situation so clearly. She had spent years being told that everything wrong in the household was her fault, her reactions, her feelings, even her silence. And here was someone finally calling out the imbalance she had lived with. Judge Judy then invited the daughter to speak. She didn't push, just encouraged. And the girl, though hesitant, began explaining in pieces what life at home had been like. She described feeling like every step she took was monitored. Every mistake became a lecture, every disagreement became a punishment, every attempt to express herself turned into an argument she couldn't win. Nothing she did was ever enough. If she got a good grade, her father complained it wasn't perfect. If she completed her chores, he found something she missed. If she stayed quiet, she was accused of having an attitude. If she spoke up, she was told she was disrespectful. Judge Judy listened carefully, stopping occasionally to ask for clarification, but never once rushing the girl. The father groaned loudly at several points, insisting she was lying or exaggerating, but Judy shut him down every time. She reminded him that she hadn't asked for his commentary. She wanted the girl's voice uninterrupted, because clearly it had rarely been allowed in her own home. When the daughter finally finished, the courtroom felt heavier, not because of sadness but because of truth settling into every corner of the space. The father sat stiffly, his arms folded tighter than before, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, whether guilt, fear, or pure ego bruising, it was impossible to tell. Judge Judy addressed him with a calm authority that made the air feel still. She told him that what she heard was not a story of a teenager being rebellious. It was a story of a teenager trying to survive in an environment where the person meant to guide her had turned parenting into a daily power struggle. She told him that a child is not disobedient simply because she has feelings, and that treating her as an opponent instead of a daughter was the source of the rift, not her behavior. The father tried to deny everything, claiming he was simply old school and that discipline was necessary. Judy did not let him hide behind that excuse. She told him there was a difference between discipline and domination, between guidance and humiliation, between raising a child and breaking her spirit. She asked him if he realized that his daughter hadn't accused him of anything outrageous, only that she felt unheard and pressured beyond reason. She asked why he considered those admissions acts of disrespect rather than cries for understanding. That the father faltered. He looked at his daughter for the first time since entering the courtroom, though not with affection, more with confusion, as if he didn't recognize her, or perhaps didn't recognize himself in the way she described him. The room fell silent. The girl sat there quietly, wondering whether she had gone too far, whether being honest would make things worse later. But Judge Judy spoke again, cutting through the tension. She told the girl she had nothing to fear, that nothing she said was wrong, inappropriate, or disrespectful. She had simply told the truth. And the truth, Judy said, is never something a child should be punished for. That statement struck the father harder than any lecture. For the first time, he didn't immediately respond. Judge Judy took that small moment of quiet and began to outline what needed to happen next. She explained that the courtroom was not a stage for personal grievances. It was a place for legal matters, not emotional warfare. She told the father that if he wanted a healthier relationship with his daughter, it wouldn't come from filing complaints or trying to embarrass her. It would come from listening. From stepping down from the pedestal he had placed himself on. From understanding that parenting is not about control, but connection. She made it clear that this case was not about the daughter's supposed faults. It was about a father forgetting his responsibility to be the mature one, the compassionate one, the understanding one. The daughter watched this unfold in disbelief. She had never seen her father be challenged like this, never witnessed someone powerful enough to make him stop and think. And though the uncertainty of what would happen next made her stomach twist, there was something new rising within her, a small, unfamiliar sense of hope. Judge Judy adjourned briefly, allowing everyone to step back and breathe. As the girl stood, her legs shaking from the emotional weight of everything, she realized that this moment was changing more than just the direction of the case. It was changing the direction of her life, and she had no idea what the next part of the hearing would reveal. When the court reconvened, the room felt different, as if the air itself had shifted during the short recess. The daughter returned to her seat slowly, almost cautiously, while her father sat rigidly, staring straight ahead, his jaw tight and his hands clasped together as if he was bracing for an impact he could no longer predict. He looked less confident than before, and for the first time, the tiniest crack in his armor had appeared. Judge Judy walked back to the bench, her expression calm but unyielding. She didn't need a gavel to command authority. Her presence alone was enough to bring the room to absolute stillness. She began by stating, in her measured voice, that she had spent the break reviewing every document, every statement, and every piece of information presented in the case so far. Then she looked directly at the father and asked him if he understood the seriousness of what he had done. He swallowed hard before answering. His voice, once loud and filled with self-assurance, now carried a note of defensiveness. He said he was only doing what he thought was necessary. He said his daughter had been difficult, and he needed the court's help to straighten her out. He insisted that this was all for her own good. Judge Judy wasn't persuaded. She leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully, and asked whether he truly believed that dragging his own child into a courtroom, publicly accusing her of every flaw he could summarize, was an act of love. She emphasized that a parent does not prove they care by humiliating their child. A parent proves they care by showing patience, compassion, and willingness to understand. The father clenched his jaw again, clearly frustrated. He repeated, more quietly now, that he didn't know what else to do. He said she didn't listen to him. That she questioned him. That she challenged him. And that, in his mind, that meant she needed correction. The judge did not let that reasoning stand for even a second. She reminded him that teenagers question things not because they are defiant, but because they are developing their own identity, their own opinions, their own voice. She told him that correcting a child is not the same as crushing them. That guiding a child is not the same as controlling them. That respect from a child is earned, not forced. The daughter listened silently, absorbing every word as if it were sunlight reaching her after years of darkness. She had waited so long for someone, anyone, to put words to the things she had felt but could never articulate. Judge Judy then turned her attention to her. She asked the girl what she wanted, not what she thought she was supposed to want, not what she was afraid to say, but what she genuinely hoped for. The girl hesitated, glancing nervously at her father, who already looked ready to contest anything she might say, but Judy reassured her gently, "Forget for a moment who is sitting beside you. Speak from your heart." Those words were like a key turning in a locked door. The daughter took a deep breath, her voice shaky at first, but gradually becoming steadier as she continued. She said she wanted peace at home. She said she wanted to stop feeling like anything she did was a disappointment. She said she wanted to have conversations without them turning into arguments. She said she wanted a father who listened, not a judge who ruled over her life every day. By the time she finished speaking, her eyes were glossy, but she didn't cry. She wasn't breaking, she was finally releasing years of tension she had held in her chest. Her father, however, looked stunned. He had expected rebelliousness, accusations, disrespect. But what he heard instead was vulnerability. Honesty. A plea for connection rather than conflict. He opened his mouth to respond, but Judge Judy lifted her hand again, stopping him. She asked him if he had heard his daughter, not just the words she spoke, but the meaning beneath them. She warned him that if he dismissed her feelings now, the damage to their relationship might permanently widen. She told him plainly that his daughter wasn't trying to undermine him, she was trying to reach him. The father's face softened, but not enough to show true understanding yet. There was pride tangled in the way he held himself, pride that had been built over many years and reinforced by habits he never questioned. Letting go of that pride would take more than a few minutes in a courtroom. But for the first time, he wasn't shouting, wasn't interrupting, wasn't claiming he was the victim. He was listening, even if awkwardly, even if reluctantly. Judge Judy, sensing the shift, continued with even more clarity. She explained that by filing the case, he had not shown strength, he had shown fear. Fear of losing control, fear of not being respected, fear of being challenged. But she reminded him that a strong parent is not one who demands obedience, but one who earns trust. The father's shoulders dropped slightly. He looked down at his hands, and for a brief moment, he seemed smaller, like a man realizing he might have been wrong, though he didn't know how to admit it. Before he could respond, Judy asked the daughter if there had ever been moments when her father acted the way she wished he would, moments of kindness, softness, or understanding. At first, the girl didn't know how to answer. But eventually, she nodded. She recalled small but important things, how he used to help her with homework, how he'd joke with her when she was younger, how he would buy her favorite snacks after school. But she also explained that those moments had become rare. Almost non-existent. And she missed them more than she could express. When she spoke those memories aloud, something shifted in the father's expression. His posture loosened, his eyes softened just a fraction. He seemed to remember those moments too, but through them, he also seemed to recognize how far he had drifted from being that version of himself. Judge Judy seized the moment. She told the father that the daughter wasn't asking for perfection. She wasn't asking for him to bend to her will. She was asking for connection, understanding. A relationship built on mutual respect instead of fear. The father looked at his daughter with an expression that was no longer anger, but something closer to realization, though he still struggled to find the right words. He didn't speak, but he didn't look away either. A fragile silence settled over the room. Judge Judy then made it very clear that before she issued any final ruling, both of them needed to understand something fundamental. A courtroom cannot fix a broken relationship, but it can uncover the truth behind why it broke. And what she had uncovered was not a rebellious child, but a wounded one. Not an evil father, but a misguided one. She told them the real question was not who was right, but who was willing to change. The daughter glanced at her father, feeling a strange mix of fear and curiosity. The father looked back, for once without the certainty he usually carried. The moment hung between them like a delicate thread. The judge leaned forward slightly, preparing to ask the question that would determine the outcome of everything that had happened so far, and both of them braced themselves for what came next. The courtroom was silent, so silent that even the soft shuffle of papers seemed loud. Father and daughter sat across from each other, a gulf of pain, misunderstanding, and years of tension stretching between them. Judge Judy rested her hands on the bench, her gaze traveling from one to the other. The weight of the entire hearing condensed into the moment that followed. She directed her attention toward the father and asked the question she knew would reveal everything. Are you willing to change the way you communicate with your daughter? Or do you intend to continue down the same path that led you here? The father blinked, as if he hadn't expected the choice to be framed so clearly. His instinct was to defend himself again, to say he was already doing his best, to justify his actions. But the judge's eyes held him still, forcing him to confront the reality that excuses wouldn't save him this time. He shifted in his seat and exhaled slowly. It sounded almost like defeat, but also like the release of something heavy he had been carrying for a long time. He admitted, in a hesitant voice, that he didn't want to keep fighting with his daughter. He said that he didn't understand her anymore, that somewhere along the way, it had become easier to raise his voice than to listen. He confessed that he thought strictness would keep her safe, but now realized it had only pushed her farther away. Judge Judy nodded once, acknowledging the honesty. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a full apology. But it was a beginning. She then turned to the daughter and asked whether she believed her father's words. Whether she thought his desire to change was real or just another attempt to look good in front of a judge. The girl hesitated, not because she doubted her father entirely, but because trust wasn't something she could hand out so easily anymore. She said she wanted to believe him. She said she hoped things could be different. But she also admitted she was scared. Scared that everything said in that courtroom would be forgotten once they returned home. Scared that this moment of vulnerability would be used against her. Scared that she would once again end up feeling like the problem instead of the person who had been hurt. Her voice cracked slightly toward the end, revealing a mixture of hope and fear so intense it rippled through the room. Judge Judy took a deep breath, then explained something both of them needed to hear. Change doesn't happen because you say you want it. It happens because you work for it, every single day. A relationship, especially between parent and child, is rebuilt through effort, consistency, and patience. She outlined her expectations clearly. The father would need to learn to communicate without dominance or intimidation. He would need to rebuild trust, not demand obedience. He would need to treat his daughter as a growing individual with thoughts and feelings, not as someone who existed solely to follow his rules. Then she turned to the daughter, telling her she would also have responsibilities, because improvement did not fall on one side alone. She would need to express her feelings clearly, speak up respectfully, and give her father the chance to meet her halfway when he genuinely tried. The girl nodded quietly, aware of the truth in Judy's words. She didn't want a perfect father. She just wanted a present one. Before issuing the final ruling, Judge Judy addressed the father with one last statement, one that would follow him long after he left the building. Your daughter didn't ask for much. She asked you to listen. She asked you to understand her. She asked you to stop treating her like a case file or a project to fix. Parenting isn't about proving authority. It's about being the person your child can turn to, not the person she's afraid of. There was no anger in her voice, only wisdom. The father lowered his head slightly, absorbing the message with a solemnity that suggested he finally understood the damage he had caused, not out of malice, but out of stubbornness, fear, and misunderstanding. Judge Judy dismissed the case, stating that no legal action was necessary and that the matter required conversation, not court intervention. She encouraged them to seek family counseling if needed, reminding them that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness but a sign of commitment to healing. As the gavel struck the block, the hearing officially ended. But the real work, the rebuilding of their relationship, was just beginning. The courtroom emptied slowly. The girl stood, expecting her father to walk ahead, as he always did, leaving her to trail behind. But something surprising happened. He paused at the aisle, looking back at her, waiting awkwardly, not out of authority, but almost out of apology. He didn't know how to say the right words, but his gesture spoke a new language. She approached him, unsure of what to expect. They walked side by side toward the exit, neither speaking at first. The silence wasn't heavy or hostile, it was uncertain, fragile, but alive with possibility. As they reached the door, the father finally found the courage to speak, not loudly, not defensively, but quietly enough that only she could hear. He told her he would try. He told her he couldn't promise perfection, but he would start by listening, really listening. He told her he didn't want to lose her. Not now. Not ever. Her eyes filled with something warm, something she hadn't felt from him in a long time, sincerity. She didn't throw her arms around him or break down crying. She wasn't ready for that. But she nodded, holding on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Better. Healthier. They stepped out of the courtroom together, not as enemies, not as opponents, but as two people standing at the fragile beginning of a second chance, and though neither of them could see the future, the first step had finally been taken.